golden age of motor racing is over, the age when factories all over Europe were producing new and experimental designs every year.
Motorsport has come a long way over the course of its 154-year history, from 8 miles per hour steam carriages puttering around the outskirts of Victorian Manchester to aerodynamic 10 million Formula One speed machines flashing down straights at 220 miles per hour. The development of motorsport has mirrored the technological advances of the modern age to continuously deliver faster and more thrilling race spectacles. On August 30, 1867, the first pre-arranged race between self-powered road vehicles over a prescribed route commenced at Ashton-under-Lyne in Greater Manchester, England. The 1894 Paris-Rouen race heralded the dawn of motorsport. The first purpose-built motor racing circuit was in Australia. The first Grand Prix motor race predated Formula One by 40 years. Formula One began in 1950. The first FIA Formula World Championship race took place at Silverstone in 1950. 150,000 spectators watched Giuseppe Farina triumph in an Alfa Romeo 158 Alfetta. Since then, many legendary drivers and teams have dazzled audiences around the world. From Juan Manuel Fangio to Alberto Ascari, Ayrton Senna to Michael Schumacher, Lewis Hamilton to Max Verstappen, F1 has crowned many champions over the years.
Goes round the outside and says, "Thank you very much indeed, I'll have that."
The future of motorsport is humanizing technology to several notches higher with virtual designing, changes in design, led by intelligent machines and alternate fuels, diversifying the sport into new categories such as drone racing and robo-racing, generating new markets and fan bases. New sustainable materials that are enabled by Nano and Bio Technology will continue to revolutionize the sport and bring different kinds of challenges to its drivers, teams, and ecosystems to meet other than the skills of driving. We feature Atharva Desai, an Indian origin American racer who is an emerging star in the Formula racing. Being inspired by his father, he took a fascination for the sport and started racing from the age of 9. Currently, in his third year at Oxford, UK, pursuing his Bachelor of Engineering, Motorsport Technology, Atharva has graduated his experience in the world of motorsport from go-kart to Formula specification cars in a short period. Hey Atharva, welcome to India and welcome to these racetracks, Bangalore.
Yes, glad to be here. Every racetrack is home for me.
How do you compare this racetrack to the ones that you do in the US or the UK right now?
Well, not sure. I'm only on one corner of this racetrack, but from the looks of it, at least from out there, it looked pretty good. I mean, all racetracks have a sort of chemistry to them, so it should have quite a bit of joy here.
You're a 20-year-old aspiring to be Formula One champion.
Driver, right, yeah.
Talk us through that journey.
Of course. I mean, I started my career in racing when I started taking interest when I was about 5 years old. Seeing Formula One on TV was probably the biggest joy I felt back there. I'd always have cars with me. I'd always have a love for cars, and racing was just kind of the cherry on top, right? So, I mean, coming into Formula One, it's not an easy feat to do. Not only do I want to just be a driver, but I want to be a world champion. That's my dream, that's my aspiration. But the real feeling of racing, it's not that feeling that I don't want is the feeling of winning. It's definitely going to be a feeling that I'm going to love, but a sort of feeling of pride, right, is what I want. That pride to carry myself onto a racetrack, coming out as a victor, but also the pride of carrying my country through it. So I'll be driving under the India flag, right? Even though I'm born in the US, I'm a US citizen, but since my culture, both my parents are from India. I was only born a year after they came to the US. They immigrated to the US. So my culture, my values, my attitude, they all come from this Indian culture, but my personality comes mostly from my American side of living these past 20 years. So, I mean, that's the sort of joy I feel whenever I drive a car, and the real aspiration is coming out, becoming world champion, and having that national anthem behind me. And I'm always looking to strive to become a better driver to achieve that dream of mine.
A date or an evening on the racetrack?
Evening on the racetrack. I can't. I cannot even choose. It's like you're telling me to choose between my favorite thing and something. Okay, sure.
How different is your life today versus another 20-year-old?
I mean, can't really. It's not really fair to judge someone just by saying it's a normal 20-year-old. I think, education-wise, it's the most important thing, right? I believe no matter what you are, an athlete or an artist or some kind of content creator, I don't think there should be any case that you should ever drop education. Even for myself, even though I'm fully committed into driving as a sport, as an athlete, I'm never wanting to give up my education side of things, which is why I also study motorsport engineering, my exact same field, but as an education standpoint. And I was raised that way, right? As Indian values, it's very imperative that you study in education. So, I mean, I'm doing a very foreign sport, I would say. It's not necessarily the most common thing you see. You go up to someone, it's very rare to see someone say, oh, I'm a race car driver and I drive it professionally. So
Right.
that itself kind of stands out from the rest of the 20-year-olds. But in general, the whole way is the same. The whole like sort of pursuit for life is the same. You stay at 20, you're pretty much almost about to graduate from college. You learn as much as you can and start getting into the real world of things. I guess for me, that's a little bit earlier into introducing myself into the rigid world of racing. It's a very unfair sport when you come first as a rookie. So everything has to be done by your talking in the track. So whether it be my speed or whether my attitude, whatever I carry, however I've shaped myself, however I talk, it's all because I've done racing and all the experiences I've learned from it. So every individual has their different experiences, different to mine, and I would say each one is unique. So to compare it, just the only difference is I'm doing a little different sport, but the sort of pathway is the same. I'm doing an education, doing a sport as well, but now I'm making it a career.
How does a typical day for Atharva Desai turn out?
Sure. I'll take you to my time in UK. In UK, obviously, I study at Oxford Brookes University, so I'm here in person. I live it's an hour commute to my university, and it's a quite rigorous subject. Motorsport engineering, you have to learn everything about race car tuning, about the dynamics, mathematics, all those things, and even material study. Like I struggled a lot when it came to material study, but a lot of studying, and I've really seen, right, that I have to really put some stress on my education, but not really waste my time all that much. So, I mean, when I was in UK, my habit was I need to get my training in, my study in, but I also have to enjoy my college life, my university life, because I think those three are the most important thing. If you're not enjoying university, there's something you're doing horribly wrong. At least that's what, from my perspective, it's saying. So how my routine was in UK is I would wake up around 5:50 in the morning-ish, and I would go to the gym at 6 for about an hour. My class was, from 6 o'clock to 7 o'clock would be my gym time. So 7:30 was when my bus would come, and 9 o'clock is when my first period started. And since I take 2 buses, there's quite some buffer time that I put in. And then I take the rest of my time to enjoy with friends or study. Now that I'm in the US, I finished my second term. My life consists of waking up not so early in the morning, but pretty early. I would say around 6:50, 7 o'clock. Go straight to the gym, get all my exercise done over there, and really look after my nutrition, obviously, and then go work on my back-end racing, as in like looking for for different opportunities, racing, or really explore that side. And when I'm not doing that, I have my racing simulator at home. So I sharpen my skills on the esports racetracks. So that's my typical day back at home.
Discipline or drill?
Honestly, I'm more of a discipline type person if I give a straight answer. I think when it comes to drill, it's also a sort of discipline, but it's a very hard, streamlined thing to do.
Right.
I'm a very organized person. I've kind of developed that. When I was in middle school, I was like the most dysfunctional, disorganized person. But as I've learned to get a little more organized within myself, really understanding how to budget my time, I think that sort of mentality and discipline with a little bit of flexibility is what works for me, rather than exactly at this time I'm going to do this thing and then at this time I stop. I think sort of flexibility, but at the back of my head, I know that no matter when the day ends, you have to do this. So it gives myself a little bit of flexibility, but I still get my work done at my 100% peak efficiency.
I have to tell this audience, this is no ordinary 20-year-old kid. You use the term organized, and that is the most important word one needs to learn. Because when you're organized, you can be disciplined. You know, you started driving at 9 and you're 20. And these 11 years must already be like a arduous journey, because everyone knows you have your sights fixed on being the Formula One champion.
Correct, yeah.
These next few years between, let's say, 20 to 25 is going to determine you being a champion, graduating through different levels.
Correct.
So talk us through it.
Yeah, I mean, coming from karting, regional level karting to F1, you can't just make that straight jump. There is sort of stepping progress to it, and it's quite a sophisticated one. You have quite a lot of options and quite a lot of prep work you need to do. Just a very oversimplified version of it, I could say, is we start from karting. You do as much karting to learn the basics as you can. That's where your entire racecraft and style is formed. Every driver or every person has a style of doing whatever, whether it be driving, whether it be working, whether it be anything. They all have a sort of aura and a style they work with, they resonate with. So in terms of a racetrack, it can be a rather aggressive style, a very eloquent style, or people invent their ways, right? So karting is the best place to sort of explore that. It's a relatively, compared to full-blown cars, it's a very inexpensive way of trying to create that style for yourself, create a name for yourself, and create that overall craft. So I started in karting like moment I hit 9 years old, and I developed my craft and started winning championships, right? So throughout the years, I graduated from regional level karting to nationals to even internationals, right? Unfortunately, internationals I wasn't able to do, but I went up to like United States national karting, and I got a podium place there, which was great. I did that in the shifter kart division. So that sort of experience was great to really shape that. And then I graduated into single seaters. That means the open wheel formula cars, as most people really know, right? So I started in Formula 4. Formula 4 is usually the best benchmark. People start even earlier, maybe, let's say in Formula Atlantics, or some smaller engine version, or some car with least downforce. Because now I'm graduating into a car which has much more downforce, something that really doesn't exist in karting, with a front wing and a rear wing. So you can really learn how to carry that speed. So I really started in F4. I debuted when I was around 16 in New Jersey. And I drove that first Formula 4 car, and it was probably the best feeling I've ever had in a race car. Okay. So going to there, so now going above that, Formula 4, going into a championship, there are multiple regions you can go to, right? Since I was born and brought up in the US, we have the series called USF4, which is United States Formula 4. Same with British. They call it GB4 there. It's Great Britain F4. Whether it be Southeast Asia, they call it SEA F4, Southeast Asia Formula 4. It can be Japanese F4 or Middle East F4. So you have these types of wide range of series. And they're the sort of way where You have these series, you compete in it, and then you graduate to the next level, which is Formula 3, right? And in Formula 3, you have the same thing. You have Formula 3 Americas, which is USF3. What we call it is Formula Regionals. You have Super Formula in Japan. You have FRECA in Europe. You have GB3 in Great Britain, and you have Middle East F3 as well. So same thing. So for F4, F3, you have this wide range of the same sort of scope, and you can choose whatever you can. It's all in regional base. It can be in Europe, Americas, it can be in New Zealand, it can be anywhere. So wherever the FIA has stapled in an official race, it's where you can do a sort of racing, correct? So that's the simplified version. Then there's only one Formula 2, and that's International Formula 2. There is no F2 regionals, F2 Americas, F2. That stopped quite a while back ago. It'd be called GP2. Now there's just International Formula 2. And then to go to International Formula 2, you go into an F1.
Okay.
So that is the sort of pathway you take. But there's also coming into the regional side. So there's the Americas, how I said, the regional F3, F4. There's also international F3 and F4. That means they follow the exact same calendars as the Formula 1 and Formula 2 calendars. And that goes around the world, and it's a way more looked at and a way more expensive race series, but the feeders type of feeding your way into Formula 1 stays the same. So it's more of that plan, and there's a lot of variance when it comes to choosing smartly your series. So that's how I planned it. I planned it like there's a strategic way to look at what series you want to go into, not just saying, let's raise as much money as we want and burn through as much money as we want, but it's a very smart and strategic way we need to keep it at.
Talk to us about the 2023 season that you have planned. And also, so 2023 is right up the corner. But if you were given an ideal way to plan this versus a constraint-based planning, we all do constraint-based planning in our lives.
Correct.
And that's the reality. But then there is also this ideal plan. Talk us through both for 2023.
I start my series at least starting in Formula 4. All right, and in Formula 4 it can be any region, and I don't want to do international Formula 4, but I want to do a region-based Formula 4. The most popular Formula 4 regions there are is either the Formula 4 US, USF4s, or the GB4s. Those are the two best ways you can attempt the Formula 4, GB4 being the most popular. And me being in the UK area and also a development driver for Ardent Motorsports, I have that opportunity, very, very good opportunity to get a seat in British F4, right? So I would start off with British F4. I guess that would be the best way, best sort of recognition and just a sort of strategic way of putting it, right? I would start there, and after I finish a season, I would want to go into F3. Now, it can be either Formula Regionals being the same thing as Formula 3, or it can be the GB3 series. Now, I would ideally want to do GB3 in Britain, but looking at the strategic way, I can either do the Formula Regional in New Zealand, or I can even try in Southeast Asia. Because just about 2 weeks ago, I was in Malaysia doing some racing in Formula 4s.
How did that go?
It went pretty well. I got the fastest time out of everyone there. I even was able to compare my data with the Ferrari driver academies, and I did quite well. But going there, I have quite some experience when it comes to the Southeast Asia Formula Regional Formula 4. So that's always an option I can take. There was going to be a Formula Regionals competition here in India, actually this November, but it was cancelled, and I was funneling my 2022 season towards trying to get some funding and some sponsorships towards doing this India series, because that would be one of the greatest opportunities. Didn't happen, so maybe it hasn't been announced yet, but they're looking forward to next year of doing that, in which I'll definitely put that on my calendar. That would be a must to do. So I would go into British F4, then go into GB3, and then ideally want to go into Indian Formula Regional. That would be the ideal, like best year for me. if I'm able to squeeze like a little bit, or if things don't work out, I can always do the Formula Regional TRS series in New Zealand, or I can even try going into Super Formula in Japan. So, I mean, that's the sort of plan I've set for myself, at least for next year, right? And me having some racing experience, but not to like a very professional standpoint. I think a sort of inching way towards Formula Regional, but also getting that proper experience, competition experience in British F4 will be quite a big boost for myself, especially with the amount of race pace and talent I have. At least I can say for myself.
Right.
Now, so that would be the idea. That would be the planned way. The most ideal way would be, if we had unlimited funding, unlimited opportunity, would be try to find the place where the most traffic and the most people are paying attention to, right? The British series, the GB3, GB4 series, is incredibly popular. It's an incredibly popular feeder series because most of the Formula One teams and driver academies are located in UK as well. So anyways, I think that even if ideally, I would want to do some form of British F3 or British F4, but when I have that experience and getting an international C license, if I had an unlimited opportunity, I would also do something like international Formula 4 and international Formula 3. It follows the Formula 1 calendar, and it's everywhere in the world. So it's a lot more commitment, takes the entire year, but the amount of sponsors that will be looking at you, the amount of opportunity you'll get there would be at its peak. And not only that, it serves as a feeder series to international Formula 3, and that's when you get the huge exposure to the F1, F2 market. Because when it comes to FIA, which is International Formula 3, you're pretty much on the roster of high-list prospects.
Right.
So then once you go in Formula 3, the Formula 2 guys are going to first see the guys who did very well in Formula 3 International.
Right.
That would be their first choice regardless. So the moment I do well in International Formula 3, my feeder series to F2 and then finally F1 would be at its best.
This is an expensive sport, and this especially takes a team to work with you, dedicated, and a whole host of being present for races in different parts of the world. What's your current team? And you obviously have to scale this. So what are your plans?
So I said before that I'm a development driver for Arden Motorsports. They're a very good GB4, GB3 team. They've won multiple races as well. They even do the FRECA series, which is the European Championship, European International Championship. So they're a very good team, and if I'm doing the British F4, F3, I would most likely want to partner with them, as I've been knowing them for about a year, and I really resonate with their team. So it's a very great place I can stay. But I don't want to stay too emotional to a set team. Obviously, the sort of team I want to resonate with is someone who really likes to work with me, and I likewise want to work with them. Whether it be on the engineering field of things or on the data field of things, whether it be how they set up my car, how easy it is to communicate with them, how little prejudice they would have, or when they look at data, whether they'll give me extra tips. Not necessarily like I judge them based on how much tips they give, but how much they're really able to vibe with me, I would say. That aura is what I really look for. So I know a few teams, both in the United States Championships, the British Championships, and even the Southeast Asia Championships. But anyways, the team I'm looking for is someone I can really work with. That's the overall gist of it. To win a racing series, it's not an individual sport.
Yes.
I mean, sure, and in the front of your eyes, it's like you're in the car, you're driving, so it's up to you to win.
Right.
To an extent, it's like that, right? But the real sort of meat that comes behind it is the amount of positivity a team comes behind with you,
Right.
the amount of trust your team puts in yourself as the driver, and how much they're willing to help to get you to achieve that. And it's an overall, like, it's an I help you, you help me type of situation.
Right.
So if you have a dysfunctional part of either side, it's not going to work out. That's just the plain truth of it. You can be given the best car in the world, but if you are mentally not stable enough, a team has just not vibed with you that properly, or they're not giving you that sort of approval aura, right? It doesn't feel good. You're not going to be performing at your best. You're going to make silly mistakes. And racing, rather than being a very physical sport, it's a very mentally tolling sport, psychologically. There's a lot of brain games. There's a lot of unfairness that happens in this sport. So you really have to improve your odds the most you can when it comes to winning. So that's just the sort of criteria I look for, regardless of any series I find.
Your initial inspiration into the sport is your father, and he comes from the Schumacher era. But who is your role model, and what have you learned in terms of how that role model prepares and then executes?
Yes, definitely. My dad was my biggest source of inspiration. Both of my family, I have huge family support. My brother, my two parents, they're very supportive of me, and that anyways gives me the big boost that I need. That's just the sort of trust that no matter how far I've gone, I always remember what have everyone else on the bottom done for me. So I'm very thankful for my family for that, and especially my dad, who's driven thousands of miles not to take me to a racetrack, to take me to a race weekend, really get me interested, even use some of his knowledge to what he learned in the Schumacher era, because he has a very analytical mind. So no matter what he sees, whether it's on TV, whether it be from someone, he kind of knows. It's something I really look up to, a sort of spark that happens, and he can really sort of understand the psychology of something, or really what to do to become successful. So I really look up to that, and he is my biggest source of inspiration when it comes to racing. And when it comes to as a role model, my biggest role model when I first started out was Niki Lauda. He's a two-time Formula One world champion, and he's also the first inspiration I got from also doing a mechanical engineering-based degree, motorsport-based degree.
Right.
Because not only was he one of the best drivers in the history of the sport, but he was also a mastermind engineer. So he knew how to set up a car, he knew exactly how to organize a team, and he knew exactly how to position those things, right? That's the sort of, and that's what I knew. I knew at a young age, it's not an individual sport, it's always a team sport, but the sort of benefit you have to give from the team, right? You can't, it never sat very good in me to just say, okay, my car doesn't turn into turn one. I mean, that's like, I would sound like a 3-year-old when I say that, right?
Right.
Like if I'm driving a small car, then I go, oh no, I can't turn. Please fix it. It's in my opinion, it's a very arrogant thing to say. Rather, I would say, okay, this car is really understeering into turn one. Is it something to do with the camber? Maybe like this, I know turn one is maybe off camber, so maybe we can change our racing line to kind of take that to our advantage. Something like that, right? And I can really resonate with both my mechanical engineer and my data engineer, so we can really have that conversation together. So that was my biggest inspiration there. Now, I didn't get my discipline as well just from air. I mean, my dad, my mom, they have their discipline, they do their work, and they've come a long way from India and then coming all over to US, surviving there just to get a better life for myself and my brother. So I'm very fortunate for that. But who I've really looked up to was actually not from a racing background at all, but it was actually basketball, Kobe Bryant. I love basketball. I think it used to be my second favorite sport. Now I think football is my favorite. European football, soccer as we call it. It's my second favorite sport I love to watch. But Kobe Bryant really had a sort of mentality, right? He had a rigid mindset and he said, no, I need to do this. I would always follow him through his stories, whatever he really worked on as a person. He wasn't just another basketballer. He was a monster at it, right? But it didn't come by like magically talent, but it came by cultivating it. One of the best examples he gave me, he said on the internet, right, at an interview, he said, really imagine something like this. Let's say you wake up at roughly 9 o'clock and you go out and practice basketball for like 2 hours. Then you have lunch, you rest for a little bit, you go back to a session, you have dinner, and then you go to sleep. Now, if you wake up just a few hours early, you can just squeeze in another session. Wake up, go practice, finalize that craft, eat, go back to practice, eat, go back to practice. So everything about that was just, he taught me how to make time efficient. I think that was the biggest thing. And that was my inspiration, how I was able to get up like at 5:50 in the morning to get to UK. I was never an early bird person. I hated waking up early. I just knew when I had to, I had to. But that discipline is what taught me that this is something I need to do. This is my sport. It's not like basketball where I can just go to a hoop, get a ball, practice the rest of my day. It's more like I have to do the best I can in the gym, best I can to improve myself mentally, and when I'm on the simulator, get as much sessions as I can. In UK, I didn't have a simulator, but in US, I do. So basically, the rest of my days are just about driving on my simulator, waking up early, training at the gym to both physically and mentally prepare for the toll of actual real racing. So the moment I get into a car, and no matter how long it takes for me to get into a race car, I always know that I'm confident enough to be prepared.
Hearing you gives a good amount of respect for the fact that you can be a great ambassador. Your sport, you obviously cannot do this with personal finance. You have to do this with promotions and sponsorships and so on.
In racing, personal finances take you up to a certain extent. I mean, my family and friends have funded me up to this level, this point in my stage. And racing doesn't get cheaper from here, right? It'll always be more expensive, more and more. But it's more about, I really look at it as a very growing sport. Take a look at basketball and football. They started from like almost nothing, but they always had a way to bring people together. That was the biggest thing. Something about that sport was what brought people together. In racing is no different, but the one thing that brings people together is the sound of a race car. I mean, that is just one aspect of it, but the racing and the sound of it is what really inspires people, right? Now, when I look at myself as a driver, as a potential ambassador for this sport, I look at myself as someone that says, I need to try my best. I need to do whatever I can to make it as far as I can. I can't do it all by myself. Like I said, it's a team sport and it's also collective effort from whatever sponsors or sponsorship agency, or whether it be my team, whether it be a company, helps me along the way. I'm very grateful no matter how far I have gone. But up to a point, I need to find some sort of way, because racing is a very unfair sport. It's all due to how much money you have at the end of the day. I'm not saying it's the only thing, but at the end of the day, that's how it works. But I would love to just keep boasting about myself, saying that I would be a great ambassador. I would love to be a part of you. But on one side, I just know that no matter who picks me up, whether you make me an ambassador, no matter what, I'm always going to try my best. I'm going to do whatever I can to reach my dream, and I'll do whatever I can to bring you along with me to my dream. So it's just a sort of believing in however way we work, no matter what we have, we'll always be able to find some opportunities for us to work together. And like I said, there are so many different opportunities around, so we can always find some sort of path. There's not always one path to get into F1, but I'll know that moment we've set a path and I'm in the race car for that first time, I'll know that I have that much support from everyone, and I know from my end, I'm always going to be physically and mentally ready. So
it is very unfortunate that in this limited span of 9 to 20, a couple of years got taken away by COVID. But yet you did something productive during that time. You started working at the back end, you started creating your website, your reach out, your fan base. Talk to us through that.
Right. I mean, the COVID pandemic was very unfortunate. There was a huge negative implications about it, not just personally, but globally. I mean, I'll only talk for myself at this point. I don't want to get mostly into the global side of it, but the way it affected me was I lost almost 2-3 years of potential racing, and also potential sponsorships, funding, because people are not going to go out of their way to fund things when they're already in a lockdown sort of situation. They would rather reserve that money and keep them to themselves. So all racing was halted, all sponsorships were halted, so it was a big just stop. So it's unfortunate on that side. Even from my high school side, I lost a lot of my graduation. That sort of pride that I would get after graduating high school, I never really embraced it at its full. Never did I get to really experience those things. But that's like the least of my concern. One thing I always believed in, and one thing I was always taught is always control what you can't control, and completely don't ignore, but don't try to control what you can't, right? I cannot control our current situation, but I can always adapt to it. And I think my biggest weapon when it comes no matter to racing, whether it be on the racetrack, whether it be off racetrack, whether it be in my communication skills, whether it be anything, is my sort of weapon to adapt to anything, to do anything out of the blue at a certain amount of time, right? I can say this for myself, that whenever if I'm making a speech, I can make a quick impromptu speech just in my head as I'm thinking. Whether it be on the racetrack, I can make decisions at a snap of a second. And it's something that not a lot of drivers have, but I tend to feel like my sort of ability of that is a lot stronger. So I always believe that no matter what will come up, I'll always do it, but that shouldn't neglect the fact that I should always prepare before. Same thing with COVID. I definitely would have believed after COVID, I would definitely be able to adapt to do whatever I can, but at the end of the day, it's a waste of 2-3 years, but it's only a waste if you think it's a waste, right? Look at everything that happens on the back end. I only thought in racing that back then, before pre-COVID, that everything was about finance, everything was about getting a good team, and like family connections to getting it. If you're not any of these three, you really don't have a chance in motorsports. Okay. But the reality is, in this sort of internet age era and this very advanced IT and AI era, there's a lot of possibilities. There are endless possibilities that goes around. So to be able to find things that other drivers are doing is very easy. It's easier now than ever. Right. So during this COVID time, both Baba and I were able to really explore this. I was able to really understand the entire politics of racing, the entire economics of racing, and what I should do to set myself up as a very good driver. Most of the things you see on the internet, especially with the amount of press releases I have, the website I've released, the courses I've released, and the sort of pictures and all the sort of digital assets I've created for myself all happened during my COVID era. So, and also, obviously, I did a lot of racing simulator there too. The boom of esports and racing was huge then. So I was able to really capitalize on these things and really work on that. So that COVID I wouldn't really necessarily see as a waste, but more of everyone is now starting from zero and now kickstarting back up. The wealthy are able to get straight into the racing, but I'm able to come up as a person where compared to the rest of the field, I'm 3 years ahead, right? That's how I like to see it, and now I'm just looking forward to how things pan up for the next few years.
India has one of the most youngest populations in the world, and Formula One racing is very popular among the young. There is a huge growing fan base out here. So how much of that fan base have you been able to tap into?
I was born in US, I have connections in UK, and my heritage is always Indian. My personality and my culture is always going to stay pure Maharashtrian. Everyone loves racing, and I think the potential here in India is amazing and like limitless. Especially even they'll be opening a Hyderabad street circuit as well, which is going to be quite a revolutionary racetrack over there, just right in the city of Hyderabad. So I'm quite excited for that. Racing here is still developing, especially the engineering side. Because I do my industrial placement here, I really understand how cheap manufacturing here is and how much potential the market here is. India has a huge growing population of motorsport racing. It's going to be huge within the next few years. It's likewise anywhere else in the US, UK, motorsport racing is basically a staple there. whether it be Road to Indy, Indy Lights, or NASCAR in the US, or whether it be WEC, GT, or F1 in the European countries or Asian countries. That is the sort of market that is there in COVID. It's not very efficient to really tap in through via online, via ads, because there needs to be a sort of spark for that to happen. You can't run an ad campaign and just make it believable that here, racing is going to be the next big thing, right? So, but I'm really hoping that I will be able to compete in this next, the series in India, so I can make sure we can really kickstart this culture of motorsport racing in India.
We talk about data science. How much data driven are you?
So I'm a very data-driven person. I love calculating things through numbers, preferably when I'd like to see things, whether it be planning a trip, doing like budgeting finances, or looking at something. All I would look at is numbers, and these numbers, everything helps me in a way, whether it also be in racing data. In racing data, we have sensors and braking sensors, steering traces, and lateral Gs, whatever, right? A lot of this data is presented right in front of us, and since me being a very data-driven person, I'm able to really understand this and implement it to my everyday racing. So let's have just a brief example. Let's talk about the Sepang International Circuit. I just went there 2 weeks ago, and let's talk about turn one. Turn one is you're going from almost top speed to almost like, I would say 70 kilometers an hour, so, or maybe even 50 if we think about it. You're really slowing down the car quite a bit, but there's always a braking trace efficiency. So so you have to brake at a certain threshold. I've trained my body to withstand like high G forces on my neck, high loads on my legs and on my shoulders and forearms. For braking, the most efficient place to brake at is 80 bar. 80 bar is the most efficient, 80, 70 bar. I have the capability of going like past 100, but that's when efficiency really drops. So now, I remember when I was in turn one, my braking, I brake as hard as I can. I'm very good at late braking, but I tend to brake very hard. So this one time I braked at almost 110 bar. And I ended up locking up most of the tires and not slowing down enough. And I would keep doing that, and I was like, really, why is this not working? And I would always mess up my steering, always mess up back on the gas, and same with everywhere else, right? Now, coming back inside after my session, I look at the data. And how much it's helped me, it's pretty much the biggest staple of how I've improved as a driver. Look at numbers saying, okay, you're braking too hard. This is what you have to do. Brake a little bit less. Try to feel it. You can feel like the 80-ish bar, the 80-ish, 70-ish bar threshold. And also try turning down brake bias a little bit. Try to put some more, or turning up brake bias. Try to put it more to the fronts of the tires, right? So that's just the biggest example. It can go as minimal as turn the wheel like a few millimeters more. I know when it comes to turn 4, turn 5, obviously I won't be able to explain it here, but I'm just going to call turn 4 a left-hander and turn right a right-hander. At first, it's very fast. It's a very fast left and right-hander quickly, and I was very afraid of turning the car. Now look at the data. It shows that my steering trace is just like this, where in reality, when comparing it to a much more experienced driver on that track, it's more like this. So this means like the higher it is, the more left lock you're putting in, the more left turn you're putting in. Where I'm putting in like this much, the other guy's putting in like this much, right? So looking from that point, that is what gains tenths and tenths of a second. And motor racing is all about gaining those tenths and tenths of a second. Every hundredth, every thousandth matters, right? So every time I'd look at my racing footage, correlate it with my data, and then really try to understand, okay, maybe brake at the 50 meter. Now I can really try braking at the 40 meter. Okay, wait, I actually locked up a little bit. Let's go back to 50, get more organized, composed, then go back at back in the garage and say, okay, you're braking at 50, you can brake at 40. It looks like the reason why you're not feeling as comfortable is because you're still on the accelerator maybe, or maybe you're putting too much brake or too little brake. because you have to hold that brake for almost a second, but maybe you're bleeding off too much. So these little things in data is what defines racing, and it's why just data-driven science is such an important fundamental pillar in motorsport racing.
Is it fair to say that a range between $5 million to $500,000 is what it's going to take for you to fulfill that journey between a F3, F2 driver to a F1 champion?
Yes, I think that's a pretty reasonable range. Obviously, when it comes to the more higher end sort of range, you'll be able to you're spending more of your budget, but you're almost taking the fast track, but it's more competitive. Now, when you look at the lower end, you think more strategically. And that's the kind of way I always organize my racing. I think by strategy, by efficiency, and by opportunity I look at. So I look at what are the strengths of that, of the racing series, what is the weakness of that racing series, what weaknesses does it have compared to other series, what opportunities can I gain from that event, and what are the threats to myself, which means if I go into the series, what is the biggest threat? Like, I think the most biggest threat that can happen is if you're a very rich individual and you go straight into Formula 3, Formula 2, and you're competing almost as a rookie. And doing that is going to be your biggest threat. You're going to be not only looked down by the general public, you're going to be insulted, your attitude is also going to sink. And I mean, it's happened, paid to drive racers in Formula 1 as well. They didn't last so long, but it all comes from a performance-based thing. But no matter how much that budget, between the range, as you said, 500,000 to 5 million, regardless, we have to strategically put our budget into it. So, but yeah, I think that range is I guess the proper way of saying, at least into Formula 2, I would say that is it. Formula 1, I don't know the costing of it, but right. I know up to Formula 2, the costing of that is around that much budget, and 500,000 to 5 million is for the next few years can easily fund me up to that station in motorsport racing. Hey
Atharva, thank you so much for taking the time to talk here on the future of work with Subbu Iyer. We will be rooting for you through the 2023 season and look forward to your aspirational path being accomplished within the time, or if not faster.
Of course, yes.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for your support, and thank you for letting me be here. Appreciate it.
Sports is coming into the mainstream today, and over $75 billion is estimated to be invested in sports. Most of that investment goes towards fan management, and this is a bubble waiting to be burst. At Giga Technologies, we are trying to bring focus on sports with respect to athlete development, sports science development, sports development, and only then event and fan-based management. All the four are interconnected. Athlete development essentially is looking at 6 dimensions: physical fitness, psychological fitness, emotional fitness, combined with diet and nutrition, rest and recovery, and capabilities, the ability to transition from one format to another in any sport, and the skills required for each of those formats. Whether it is an individual or a team sport, different strengths need to be capitalized. There are always going to be strengths and weaknesses. How do we capitalize the strengths in a team sport is how a team wins. And the roles that the team, the extended team, and the ecosystem plays to a precise definition, which is data driven, is extremely critical. And therefore, data science pervades all the 4 parts, from an athlete development to sports science development to the sport development, which is innovating on the sport itself, which then leads to an engaged fan management and event management. Unless the sports investment portfolio consists of mutually including these 4 areas, the quality of sports is bound to suffer. The thrill of motorsports that a section of the world has enjoyed so far is opening up to a global marketplace. Tremendous innovation has gone into the sport, humanizing automotive technology. A new era is about to unfold in the motorsports arena just as much as in any other sport. We believe that young athletes such as Atharva Desai will be the leaders in this new era. Atharva's education in engineering that relates to his passion, which is to be a Formula champion, is wedded with one another. He understands that education, training, practice and performance with learning at every single stage is the way to advance to his aspirations. Even though he is the only one to climb the podium, there is a huge ecosystem that works with him, and that narrows down to his team that dedicates in making this performance happen. And they all have to learn concurrently in order to win a championship. And every championship won is just one milestone in that pursuit of excellence. Max Verstappen, Lewis Hamilton, Fernando Alonso, Michael Schumacher, Ayrton Senna, Niki Lauda, these great names, they have brought the sport to where it is today. The future is with athletes such as Atharva Desai, who will take the sport to a different trajectory, creating infrastructure and events in India, in Africa, in Southeast Asia, new markets, new fan bases, and new aspirations, building a greater number of athletes and fan participation globally. Thank you, Atharva, for taking the time to record this episode. And also thanks is owed to Relay Sports and their team for making this happen. Thank you to my team of Siddharth Patel and Kutso Kwatsa, who work relentlessly behind the scenes. I would also like to take this opportunity to thank Miko Kartopia, who allowed us to record this videocast on their tracks. Please do subscribe to any of your favorite available channels and do share your perspectives at fow@giggr.abp. In the next episode, we bring you Mauro Porcini, Chief Design Officer, who has recently authored The Human Side of Innovation. Until then, stay safe, be happy, and enjoy the ride. #Tuesdays at 5.